Hello. Good morning, everyone. Again, good morning, everyone. We will start in 10 minutes. Please do find your seats in a bit. Thank you. Hello. Good morning, everyone. May we request you all to please take your seat. We'll be starting our event in a few minutes. May we please request everyone to take your seats now? All right. Please rise for the Philippine National Anthem.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiliw, telas ng silangalan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa mandulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nagagang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mo bangag, ay hinagang tulad, awit sa pagkayang minamahal, ang isang ng matawag mo'y tagumpay na naghihingi, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pang ay di magtitingin, luman ang araw ng walhagit pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo, ang inigaya ng pagkay mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
You may now take your seat. All right. Good morning to our speakers and distinguished guests from the government, the diplomatic community, the academe, and think tanks. I am Joyce Ilas. I am the Communications and Advocacy Lead of Chat-based ADR Institute, and I will also be your host for today. Welcome to the forum on the 7th year of the Arbitral victory, defending the West Philippine Sea, the Indo-Pacific, and the rules-based order. It's a very wonderful morning today. The energy this morning is very high. So thank you everyone for joining us today. This event is organized by the Chat-based ADR Institute, and this is actually a hybrid event. So thank you to everyone who is here with us today in the venue. And I would also like to thank everyone who is joining us live via Zoom and who are watching us live on Facebook. Exactly 7 years ago, the Arbitral Tribunal delivered a unanimous and final decision, rejecting China's expansive 9-dash line, declaring it as baseless and ruling that China has no lawful claims to the areas covered by the Philippines' exclusive economic zone and continental shelf. Now we are bringing together government officials, members of the diplomatic community, scholars, and policy experts to exchange views on the strategic value of the Arbitral Tribunal ruling, especially in maintaining the rules-based international order in the Indo-Pacific. This morning, our panel discussion is supported by the Australian government. We will discuss the current security threats in the West Philippine Sea with emphasis on the importance of maritime cooperation among like-minded states and key stakeholders. This is a very timely issue, and I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting day today. And to officially open the discussion, please welcome Chat-based ADR Institute's President, Victor Andres Dindo Manhit.
Good morning to everyone. Good morning to friends from the international community, friends from the different sectors of Philippine society. And also I'd like to welcome, I think through Zoom, some of friends, I think 320 of them have registered. Some of them are even following us as far as Pag-asa Island. So welcome, everyone. Now, when you speak of 7 years ago, I remember the afternoon of July 12, 2016. I was with our late chairperson, Albert Rosario, waiting, thinking that it will come out soon. And when it came out, complete silence, sad to say, from the Philippine government. So we decided on that day that we will make it as a mission to raise this issue, to tell the whole world that we won and that this is ours. And it reminds me of his favorite line. And he said, Dindo, international law is a great equalizer amongst it. We are small, but we can be powerful based on a rules-based order. And the past few years since then, 7 years after, we have tried to track geopolitical issues and risks. But we can always turn risks into opportunities. And we have taken note of what I call the asymmetric challenges facing the Philippines as we advance a rules-based international order in a multipolar world and geopolitical shifts and the evolving security landscape of the Indo-Pacific. A few months back, I spoke about the Indo-Pacific in a commentary in my regular column, The Inquirer, where I spoke of the Indo-Pacific has become complex and multipolar, and as a result of increased competition and cooperation. Only multilateral cooperation and strong alliances among like-minded states will endure the collective peace and security of the region. I spoke of strong partnership, deep friendship. And as we track issues on the geopolitical landscape in the Indo-Pacific, we have seen security challenges evolve from traditional, non-traditional, and even evolving security threats. And we will continue to focus on that. But at the core of it, we believe is a rules-based international order. And we have seen how the world stands up in the region, in the Indo-Pacific region. I woke up this morning reading the statement of the EU. Thank you to our dear ambassadors. And I thank you all who will be here to speak. I'm a historian by training initially, then went to political science, then went to public policy. So I like to look at the world from a historical, geographical perspective. We are not alone in believing that we live in a rules-based international order. Somebody wanted to put that in our mind in 2016, or a country wanted to have that in our mind. But that's not true. And as we listen to our president's statement about his independent foreign policy, it reminds me of what he said. He speaks of national interest. He will not abandon even 1 square inch of Philippine territory. And what is national interest? Right after the SONA, I wrote about it, and I spoke of what is national interest. I agree with the leadership, our head of state, that it's a primordial guide of an independent foreign policy. But who defines national interest? I think the Filipino people defines national interest. Again, I'm a political science by training, so I like to look at quantitative data. 6 months into our arbitral victory, when government then wanted to keep us quiet, 84% of the Filipino people told us in our survey, we would like the Philippine government to assert our rights in the West Philippine Sea, as stipulated in the decision of the Permanent Court of Arbitration. And we continue to run the surveys year after year, consistent. And with the inauguration of a new president, the eve of his inauguration, it even went highest at 89%. That is Philippine national interest. That's the Filipino people speaking, saying to government, this is what we want. And government has responded well. And we hope consistency and institutionalization of this assertiveness with the help of friends. In that survey, 89% across geographic area, across demographic area. We even spoke of the need to invest in the capability for external defense, the Navy, the Coast Guard, hitting 90%. We presented these surveys last year, and we will present some again an hour from now from Pulse Asia President Ronald Holmes. But early on, right after the election, we published a book with our scholars, with our colleagues in the ADRi Institute. One of the authors, Dr. Rene de Castro, is with us here, whereby I spoke of promoting the Philippine government should prioritize partners that promote a rules-based international order, where we can engage in multilateral and inclusive cooperation that will enable the Philippines to contribute to the global effort of promoting shared democratic values, rules-based international order. And what we have as speakers today, what we have in this venue, is really a collective effort of people from different nations, from Filipinos, who speak of a rules-based order founded on democratic values. We are here today marking the 7th anniversary of our victory at the Permanent Court of Arbitration. But the real test is for us to continue in the struggle to actualize the victory. The decision of the Arbitral Court assures us that we are on the right side of human history and provides a solid foundation for our acts. The challenge for us, for my Filipino compatriots, moving forward, is how can we build on this foundation? We must commit that we will never allow this victory to be diminished and trampled on. We at the Institute support all forms of cooperation with countries who share our values and reverence for a rules-based order. And today we are happy to have friends, networks coming together in this venue, talking to the different technology outside this room. That we are thankful for everything we have done together this past 7 years. And we look forward to future areas of collaboration as we deal with traditional, non-traditional, and evolving threats on various fronts. Moving forward, we believe in the Institute that a Philippine strategic initiative which explores the interplay between geopolitics and geoeconomic development and focuses on cross-sectoral concerns evolving around the global economy, security, governance, energy, and the environment should be the focus of our institute, and we hope to announce that this morning. This initiative will bridge the gap between geopolitics and economic development, especially when you look at the basic concerns of the Filipino people. It's still about those looking for jobs, better income, better lives, and highlight the importance of shared democratic values and rules-based order in a multipolar world. Defending the Philippine territory, asserting our sovereignty, and committing to uphold the rules-based international order in this dynamic, multipolar world is the right thing to do. It is the only thing to do. And this is what we commit in the strat-based ADRi Institute. Together, to our guests today, to those listening through the web, let us defend the peace and stability of the West Philippine Sea, the Indo-Pacific, and the rules-based international order. Again, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Professor Dindo Manhit. Again, that was a very powerful speech. We will never allow this victory to be diminished and trampled on. just like he said. The unlawful activities and aggressive actions of China towards Philippine vessels threaten the peace and security in the Indo-Pacific, particularly in the West Philippine Sea. China's blatant disregard of our 2016 Arbitral Tribunal victory undermines our shared democratic values and the rules-based international order. The support of the international community is crucial as the Philippines continue to assert its national sovereignty and territorial integrity in the West Philippine Sea. Since 2016, the international community has rightfully recognized and strongly maintained that the West Philippine Sea is ours and that China has no legal right to claim what is ours. So we are deeply grateful and honored to have with us this morning our friends and longtime partners from the embassies of Australia, Japan, European Union, France, United Kingdom, and India, who have stood with us and continue to advocate for the Philippines' stance on the West Philippine Sea. Their support, alongside that of our other like-minded partners, illustrates a united front that we will not sit idly by and let a belligerent state demean our victory and erode the pillars of our rules-based international order. And on that note, we would like to call on our first speaker for today, Her Excellency HKU, the Australian Ambassador to the Philippines. She will talk about elevating the Philippine-Australia partnership in the context of evolving regional dynamics. Again, ladies and gentlemen, it is our privilege to welcome Ambassador HKU.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Magandang umaga. It is indeed my great pleasure to be addressing such a distinguished audience today from the Philippine government, from many embassies and many of my friends, ambassadors. It's great to see you in the audience, academia, think tanks, and of course, the important media that amplifies these important messages. I want to first start by paying my respects to the late former Philippine Foreign Secretary, Albert del Rosario, and express my sincere condolences to his family and friends for his passing earlier this year. It is a big loss for all of us. Because Secretary del Rosario was a champion of international law and led the Philippines to commence international arbitration proceedings to bring about a peaceful resolution to disputes in the South China Sea. And it is the 7th anniversary of that landmark arbitral award that brings us all here today. And it underscores the fundamental importance of international law in resolving disputes peacefully. And as a founder of Strat ADR Institute, and indeed its namesake, I know that Secretary del Rosario would be proud of the strength and support today's groupings bring to protecting the peace, stability, and prosperity of the Indo-Pacific. And I'm delighted that Australia is supporting today's extremely important event to celebrate international law with all of you and mark the occasion of this very important award. We all depend on a region governed by accepted rules and norms, where all countries can cooperate, trade, and thrive. We've got that right. This includes ships and aircraft being able to take goods to market and even people to each other unimpeded. The South China Sea is a vital waterway for the entire international community. We want to see a peaceful South China Sea where international law is respected and adhered to, and waterways are open for trade. But we all know, sadly, the South China Sea faces many risks and challenges. Maritime claims inconsistent with UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, are causing tension. This is worsened by what we are seeing as the militarization of disputed beaches and unsafe behavior at sea and in the sea, which we have unfortunately seen too much of in recent times. And this sits against a backdrop of illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing, barriers to harnessing marine resources, and degradation of the natural environment. Because ultimately, this is about livelihood. Australia is deeply concerned when countries pursue claims or engage in activities that are inconsistent with international law, where they undertake activities that are provocative and destabilizing, or where they don't respect the rights and freedoms of others, or when they advance their claims by intimidation and coercion. UNCLOS provides the comprehensive legal framework for all activities in the oceans and seas, and it provides the foundation for peace and security and stability in the maritime domain. Adherence to UNCLOS is vitally important for the region, and maritime claims, whether in the South China Sea or elsewhere, must be consistent with UNCLOS. On its 7th anniversary, it remains as important as ever that the parties abide by the 2016 South China Sea Arbitral Award. So Australia's actions are guided by our desire to support our partners, enhance maritime security, and uphold international law. That is why we invest so heavily in maritime partnerships in the region, to build maritime domain awareness, combat challenges like illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. And that is why we will continue to exercise freedom of navigation and overflight, support the rights of others to do the same, and strengthen our relationships with our regional partners. This has been a big year for the Philippine-Australia relationship, with high-level visits from our Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister Richard Marles, Foreign Minister Penny Wong, Trade and Tourism Minister Don Farrell, and Special Envoy for Southeast Asia, Nicholas Moore. And last week, very fittingly, we had our bilateral maritime security dialogue. This was the third we had, and I understand we were the inaugural country to start it with the Philippines. This demonstrates just how important the Philippine relationship is to Australia. Our maritime partnership is central to our relationship and the vision we share for the region. It's about safety, it's about stability, and it's about prosperity. It's respect for sovereignty, mutual trust, shared ambition, and so importantly, hope for the future. That is why formally elevating our relationship to a strategic partnership later this year is a top priority for both our countries, certainly for the Australian government. To formally recognise what we already know is true, that we are already de facto strategic partners, with our maritime partnership being a central pillar of our long-standing and wide-ranging relationship. That is why Australia is investing 3.6 billion pesos in regional maritime programs, and Philippines is one of our most significant beneficiaries. During Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong's visit to Manila, she reaffirmed Australia's commitment to promoting a safe, secure, and prosperous Indo-Pacific, where sovereignty is respected. She also announced new maritime programs that Australia will pursue with the Philippines. These include providing drones, associated training and other technology to strengthen the Philippine Coast Guard's maritime domain awareness and marine environmental protection capabilities. It includes information sharing and technical assistance for Philippine maritime legislators and government officials. technical assistance to help mitigate the environmental impacts of the recent oil spill off the island of Mindoro, as well as regional training for Philippine fisheries officers to strengthen illegal fishing responses. And finally, one of my favorites, fostering women's leadership in maritime security and marine environmental protection. These build on a whole suite of initiatives we already have underway, like the Law of the Sea course, where we have trained over 440 Philippine government officials. And frankly, the list goes on. As Australia's ambassador to the Philippines, I offer this commitment before all of you. Our embassy will work tirelessly with our Philippine friends and other valued partners to promote adherence to international law and the 2016 South China Sea Arbitral Award in an effort to support the peaceful, prosperous, and stable region we all deserve to live in. In the current environment, I can't think of a fewer greater priorities than this one. Maramit salamat po and mabuhay.
Thank you very much, Ambassador HKU. Now, our next speaker will talk about promoting cooperation and dialogue in Japan's new plan for a free and open Indo-Pacific. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to welcome His Excellency Koshikawa Kazuhiko, Ambassador of Japan to the Philippines. A warm round of applause, please.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Good morning, everyone. Before starting my presentations, I'd like to express, like my colleague, Ambassador Yu, my deepest condolences on the passing of Honorable Alberto Rosario, the former Foreign Secretary and chairperson of this institute. His vital role in securing landmark 2016 Arbitral Award on South China Sea for the Philippines showed his staunch commitment to upholding rule of law. His admirable achievements and legacies will forever be remembered. Moving on, I'd like to thank the Strat-based ADRi Institute for inviting me to this seminar. The presence of high-level officials and ambassadors here demonstrate our shared determination to maintain the rule-based international order. The Arbitral Award in 2016 was a significant milestone for realizing rule of law at sea. At the G7 summit in Hiroshima last May, the leaders reaffirmed this point. As our economy heavily dependent on international trade, Japan is a major stakeholder with outstanding interest in the freedom of navigations and overflight in South China Sea. Just a while ago, Foreign Ministry issued in Tokyo the statement commemorating the 7th anniversary of the Arbitral Award. Japan has reiterated the Tribunal Award is final and legally binding on the parties to dispute under the provision of United Nations Convention of Law of the Sea. We also reiterated our support to the Philippines' commitment to the peaceful settlement of dispute in the South China Seas. Japan was the first country that promoted the concept of the free and open Indo-Pacific. The late Prime Minister Abe launched the free and open Indo-Pacific concept during his speech at Indian Congress in 2007. He pointed out the Pacific and Indian Oceans are now bringing about a dynamic coupling as a sea of freedom and of prosperity. And we have witnessed the regional landscape have developed with such trajectory. Let me clarify the meaning of free and open Indo-Pacific. under the current international situation. With the rise of emerging and developing countries, the international community is facing a compound crisis with a confluence of various difficulties, such as global challenges and issues brought about by scientific and technological development. By upholding the core principles of the post-war international order, Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific aim to bridge the Pacific and Indian Ocean, where the economy is growing, and realize stability and prosperity in the region. The core principle of free and open Pacific are defending freedom and rule of law and respect for diversity and inclusiveness and openness. In the current situation where there is no consensus on what should be the underlying perspective for the next year, I believe that free and open Indo-Pacific is a vision that is increasing in relevance in order to seek cooperation among international community. Free and open Indo-Pacific has gained widespread support and endorsement from many countries and shares fundamental principles with ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific. Last March, our Prime Minister Kishida announced the new plan for free and Indo-Pacific. Throughout this initiative, Japan will contribute to the enhancement of connectivity in the Indo-Pacific region, foster the region into places that values freedom and rule of law and is free from force and coercion, and make it prosperous. The basic approaches are A, rule making through dialogue, having a dialogue and cooperation regardless size of a country. Equal partnership among nations, aim for a world where diverse nations coexist and prosper together under the rule of law, without falling into geopolitical competition. Instead of unipolar, bipolar, or multipolar one, approach focusing on the people, creating necessary conditions for the survival, welfare, and life with dignity of individual people anywhere in the world, while respecting diversities and inclusiveness among countries. Free and open Indo-Pacific has been evolving in a way that embraces various voices from the international communities. Let me reiterate, the free and open Pacific is not a tool for geopolitical competitions, but rather a plan that will be implemented through the cooperation with like-minded partners, including G7, Australia, India, etc. Particularly, Japan will strengthen the partnership with the Global South, including ASEAN countries, in order to expand our efforts in promoting regional stability and prosperity. Japan-Philippine cooperation efforts had always been the leading cases of free and open Indo-Pacific. Japan continues to support the Philippines' stance of rule-based dispute resolutions. For instance, we have been constantly supporting the capacity development of Philippine Coast Guard. To date, Japan has delivered 10 44-meter class multi-role response vessels and 2 97-meters class multi-role response vessels to the Philippine Coast Guard through the official development assistance. These vessels are now playing a central role in the Philippine Coast activities in the Philippine Seas and the West Philippine Sea. Japan also provided coastal radar system to the Philippine Coast Guard and is slated to provide a satellite communication system that will link Coast Guard vessels to the PCG headquarters. We believe that these collaborations have definitely improved the maritime domain awareness capabilities of the Philippine Coast Guard. In June, Coast Guard of Japan, the Philippines, and the United States conducted their trilateral exercise, the first in the history. It should also be noted the first Japan, Philippines, US, Australia defense ministerial meeting was held in Singapore early last month. Our defense leaders share the visions for free and open Indo-Pacific and agreed to collectively make effort to ensure that vision continues to thrive. With Prime Minister Kishida's commitment made at the Shangri-La Dialogue last year to provide $2 billion US dollars in assistance, such as provision of maritime security equipment, including patrol vessels to Indo-Pacific countries over next 3 years, we will redouble our effort to strengthen the support for the Philippine maritime law enforcement and maritime domain awareness capabilities. Our defense cooperation has also been enhanced recently, and we are working on a new framework, including what we call a reciprocal access agreement or a visiting force agreement, as well as MDA capacity building of the armed forces of the Philippines through our new grant aid scheme called Official Security Assistance. In addition to the conventional area of development aid, such as infrastructure assistance, we're exploring a new area of cooperation stated in the new plan for free and open Indo-Pacific, such as climate mitigation and cybersecurity. In recent years, there have been close discussions and dialogue on the free and open Indo-Pacific among the like-minded countries, such as Japan, US, Philippines, Japan, US, Australia, Japan, US, Australia, India, and G7. Furthermore, it is worth noting that in-depth discussion on the free and open Indo-Pacific have begun among European countries. In addition to policy dialogue, joint training and exercise by maritime law enforcement agencies and military forces have been frequently being conducted between these countries in Pacific Ocean, Indian Ocean, South China Sea, and East China Sea, etc. Such development reflect the strong interest and determination of these countries in realizing free and open Indo-Pacific, which is premised in the maintaining law-based international order. This year marks the 50th anniversary of Japan-ASEAN cooperation. Japan will host special commemorative summit in December in Tokyo. Prime Minister Kishida will visit the Philippines beforehand, I believe, and we expect that our leaders will further deepen their cooperation to realize shared fundamental principles of free and open Indo-Pacific and ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Koshikawa Kazuhiko. Now, our next speaker will talk about the EU strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, working together for collective stability and prosperity. It is our pleasure to introduce the Ambassador and Head of the Delegation of the European Union to the Philippines, His Excellency Luc Veron.
Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen, magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Very pleasant morning to you in the room and online. Thank you very much for inviting the European Union to this very opportune event marking the 7th anniversary of the Arbitral Award in favor of the Philippines. I don't have to remind this room why the Indo-Pacific matters for the world. 3 of the 4 largest economies outside the EU are here. 60% of global wealth is produced, 2/3 of global growth. The Indo-Pacific is central to global value chains, international trade, and international investment flows. Why does the Indo-Pacific matters to the European Union? The EU is the top investor, the top development assistance provider, and a big trading partner for the region. Around 40% of EU foreign trade passes through the South China Sea. Stability in the region is a shared concern and an area of cooperation. As you know, the European Union articulated its Indo-Pacific strategy almost 2 years ago. However, the EU interests and engagement in this very crucial part of the world are much older. The EU has been working with countries around the Indian Ocean, in Asia, in the Pacific for decades. The Indo-Pacific has been a critical area for Europe and the world's economy, I would say, for centuries. And its importance is only growing. The long-lasting engagement of the EU with the Indo-Pacific has covered many areas, trade agreements, development cooperation, and security. This panel is on maritime security. I want to recall the EU's naval force operation in the Indian Ocean off the coast of Somalia, Atalanta. This is an operation against piracy and armed robbery at sea that started in 2008 on the critical waters in the vicinity of the Gulf of Aden, complementing other international efforts. EU NAVFOR Atalanta has contributed to bringing down the number of attacks from a peak of 199 in a single year, 2009, to just 27 in the whole decade since 2013. Zooming closer, almost 60 years of diplomatic relations between the EU and the Philippines, and more than 45 years of partnership with ASEAN are also testament of the EU's engagement with this part of the world. The EU's engagement in cooperation with Indo-Pacific are sustained and bound to increase as the region's contribution to global GDP as well as geopolitical tensions increase. Certainly, the EU is affected by a war at its doorstep, and Russia's rogue and aggressive behavior and domestic situation are causes for concern. However, that does not distract us from the realization that the world's future will be determined by events in the Indo-Pacific, and that we have to work together in order to avoid a confrontation in the region. You may be familiar with the 7 priority areas in the EU strategy for cooperation with Indo-Pacific: sustainable and inclusive prosperity, green transition, ocean governance, digital governance and partnership, digital connectivity, defense and security, human security. These are areas of shared interest for most of us represented in this room. The EU approach towards the Indo-Pacific is based on cooperation, not confrontation. Our Indo-Pacific strategy is not, or not only, a security strategy, but a comprehensive policy that takes into account the interconnections between the economy and geopolitics. In line with the topic of this morning's session, I would like to focus on 2 priorities that are fundamental for attaining many of the other objectives of our strategy: ocean governance and international law, and maritime security. We have seen in Europe what happens when a country completely disregards the basic rules and principles that sustain the international order. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine and illegal occupation of Ukraine is not only causing a human tragedy, it is, and an environmental catastrophe. It is also putting the world's economic recovery from COVID-19 pandemic in jeopardy and causing a global food and energy crisis. This leads me to the Indo-Pacific. As the same principles are at stake here, the European Union strongly opposes any unilateral attempts to change the peacefully established status of territories by force or coercion anywhere in the world, be it in Eastern Europe or in the South China Sea. The Permanent Court of Arbitration laid down very clearly that there is no legal basis for China's expansive maritime claims in the South China Sea. we are one with the Philippines and other international partners in stressing the importance of upholding international law, including UNCLOS, and the peaceful settlement of disputes as a basis for peace and stability in this part of the world and elsewhere. Respect for rules-based international order is at the core of the EU approach towards cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. The EU is determined to work with the Philippines and other partners in support of a free and open Indo-Pacific, and more broadly, a free and open international order based on the rule of law, respecting the UN Charter to the benefit of all countries, irrespective of their size or their power. The EU also stands ready to facilitate activities which help build confidence and prevent and diffuse tensions. For this reason, we have supported the negotiation of a code of conduct for the South China Sea, while underlying that it should not affect the rights and interests of third parties. The EU has also spoken up occasionally, in certain cases of unacceptable behavior by Chinese vessels. The EU is also stepping up its engagement in more operational terms. Since 2018, the EU has been building maritime capacity of partners in the Indo-Pacific so that they can better address threats to maritime safety and security and preserve sustainable fish stock through the CRIMO-IO project. The core of IRIS, the Indo-Pacific Regional Information Sharing, is a neutral and secure platform for exchanging information and improving domain awareness and operational responses. The EU has been training Philippine officials from the Navy, the Coast Guard, and other departments involved in maritime law enforcement on the use of this platform. In May this year, more than 90 senior officials and representatives from 45 agencies across the Indo-Pacific region, together with other regional actors, met to agree upon IRIS regional governance structure. So far, 20 countries and agencies, including, as I said, the Philippine National Coast Guard Watch Center, have signed the IRIS Partnership Agreement, which offers IRIS functionalities and satellite services in exchange for effective and regular use of the platform. The EU is organizing other capacity building activities with the Philippines and other countries in the region, complementing our contribution to regional security through the RAF. Besides the exchange of knowledge and information, this helped build trust among Asian and European officials and other experts. We also hope to develop cooperation and complementarity with other like-minded partners who are also active in building maritime security capacity in the Indo-Pacific, including the Philippines. The EU and ASEAN have been holding a high-level dialogue on maritime security cooperation since 2014. As concerns the Philippines, I'm happy to announce that under the bilateral partnership and cooperation agreement, we have now a new bilateral dialogue on maritime affairs, which will lay the ground for further cooperation in areas such as maritime security, maritime labor, and IUU fishing. The first meeting of this subcommittee on maritime affairs will take place in September or October. Despite the war that is raging at its doorsteps, the EU is committed to enhance its security cooperation in and with Asia and Indo-Pacific. Building upon our experience with Atalanta, we have launched coordinated maritime presence of our member states' navies in 2 areas, including one in the Indo-Pacific, in northwestern Indian Ocean. Although this does not concern the South China Sea, we're seeing more and more interest by several of our member states' navies, and we have seen in the last few days the presence of a brand new French frigate and a brand new Italian frigate. As the EU High Representative Borrell said in Singapore just a few days ago, the Russian war against Ukraine is prompting a strategic transformation of the European Union, security and defense policy and capabilities, which also make us a more capable partner for Asia and the Indo-Pacific. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Luc Veron. Our next speaker will be talking about France in the Indo-Pacific, promoting an open and inclusive region under the rule of law. We are honored to have with us today Her Excellency Michelle Bocaz, Ambassador of France to the Philippines and Micronesia. Let's give her a round of applause.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear Dindo, distinguished guests, Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. I am very honored to be with you today. I would like, before I start my speech, to also pay tribute to Secretary Albert del Rosario, whose role has been invaluable in the topic we're discussing today. Without him, we wouldn't be here today, and I would really like to pay this strong tribute to his action. There is indeed no legal basis for China's expansive maritime claim in the South China Sea. This position was clearly stated in April during the G7 Foreign Ministers' communique. Also last week, together with the Philippines and other like-minded countries, France expressed its concern in regard to the recent developments involving Chinese vessels in the South China Sea. The peaceful resolution of disputes based on the rule of law is the very basis of international order our nations established after two devastating world wars. For years now, this order has been challenged with increased determination and sophistication. In Europe, for over a year now, Russia's war in Ukraine has caused atrocities on a scale defying imagination, severely undermining the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter. From the Black Sea to the South China Sea, the issues are our shared concern. This is why France, as permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, has been long advocating the inclusion of other global positive stakeholders such as India and Japan. We are also supporting the Philippines' candidature to the UN Security Council for the 2027 and 2028 period. There is simply no alternative to the strict adherence to the rule of law. In that regard, through the 2016 award, the Philippines upholded the highest standards. This historical milestone paves the way for a peaceful settlement of disputes in the South China Sea. While France does not take position on sovereignty aspect relating to claims, it is, I think, our joint fundamental interest to underline the importance of such efforts to maintain a non-confrontational, constructive behavior for regulating international relations. It is true by principle, as I already explained, and also because of the Philippines' strategic position in the region and its wider implication for global stability. In the wider Indo-Pacific region, nearly 2 million French citizens live in our French territories, where we have to look after more than 11,000 square kilometers exclusive economic zone, the second largest in the world. Indeed, stability and order in the region matter to us. This is why we have more actively involved these last few years in defense and security partnerships in the Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific region, in addition to promoting multilateralism and political dialogue in all relevant fora. In 2022, France was admitted as an observer in the ADMM Plus group. We are fully committed to contribute to a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific together with the Philippines and other ASEAN partners. But action speaks louder than words. With the Philippines specifically, France increased the frequency of its maritime interactions, with 3 frigates coming here this year, and preparation made to have our Navy flagship, the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier, here by 2025. In June, the port call of destroyer Lorraine was the illustration of our sustained commitment in this domain. And we were very honored, by the way, to welcome some of you on board the frigate. Like his predecessor last year, Rear Admiral Geoffroy Dantigny, Joint Commander of the French forces in the Asia-Pacific, reiterated his wish to deepen our bilateral ties, as well as cooperation with the like-minded partners in the region. This year, France participated for the first time as an observer to the Balikatan exercises and also joined the Sama-Sama exercises. The Philippines participating in the Southern Cross exercises, together with Australia and New Zealand on HADR missions. Since 2005, we have also a structured cooperation with the Coast Guards. We are also an important partners for modernization of the Philippine Defense and Security Forces. In a few weeks, we will have a full-time resident defense attaché within the walls of our new embassy, as well as a new political counselor in our chancery. As you can see, we are substantially increasing our presence here as the stakes and opportunities increase. In the current context of rising tension, the relevance of the 2016 award is gaining a stronger momentum, as reflected with the wider support of like-minded nations. We welcome this trend, and we will continue to show our support. We will continue to walk the talk. Thank you for your attention. Maraming salamat po. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Michelle Bocoz. Now, our next speaker will be talking about the United Kingdom's Indo-Pacific strategy, promoting reliable partnerships in the region. It is a privilege to have with us today Her Excellency Laure Beaufils, British Ambassador to the Philippines.
Thank you. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen and friends. It's an absolute pleasure to be here this morning and to speak alongside such distinguished speakers on the anniversary of the 2016 Arbitral Award. Like others, I'd like to start by paying my respect to Secretary Albert Rosario and his legacy, which we are celebrating this morning. And I also want to thank Stratbase for hosting this really important conference. This is indeed a very important and timely conference. For us, as the UK, it comes on the back of the UK-Philippines Joint Defence Committee last week, co-chaired by our Ministry of Defence and the Philippines Department of National Defence. And just 2 months before, in February, we had our second UK-Philippines Maritime Dialogue. Both demonstrate how seriously we are taking our relationship with the Philippines on these issues. But this event also comes as the NATO summit in Vilnius is concluding. This historic summit reminds us how much we value international law and our shared security. It sends a strong signal to all those that are watching that the resolve of those that stand up to blatant violations of international law is stronger than ever. And it is a demonstration that the security of the Indo-Pacific and that of the Euro-Atlantic are increasingly connected. Let me begin by the obvious. The UK is far from the Indo-Pacific, but the Indo-Pacific matters to the UK. It does so for obvious reasons. For example, nearly 2 million British citizens live in the region, and our trade with the Indo-Pacific is nearly 12% of our GDP. It's not just the Indo-Pacific in general terms. What happens in the South China Sea also matters to the UK. It does so because freedom of navigation and overflight is essential. It is essential to our security and prosperity, yes, but it is essential full stop as a cornerstone of international maritime law. And we have a collective responsibility to ensure that the South China Sea is not a testing ground for reckless behavior. The consequence of escalation of tensions in the South China Sea would have implications for all of us, including, but not limited, to major risks to global economic stability. Earlier this year, the UK published its Integrated Review Refresh, a comprehensive strategy that reflects on the intensification of competition, the great pace of geopolitical change, and the increasingly volatile and contested world that we live in. And we reflect on our place within that. Our conclusion is that those who believe in the principles of openness, good governance, respect for sovereignty, and respect for international law must do more to build our resilience and out-cooperate those driving instability. As such, the UK will take a more active and activist posture on the world stage. So our direction is clear, and we will proudly and confidently play our part in support of a free and open, peaceful and inclusive Indo-Pacific. This begins by standing up for what we believe in. We stand up for international law, the international law-based maritime order, including UNCLOS. The Minister for the Indo-Pacific of the UK reiterated our unwavering support for UNCLOS on its 40th anniversary at the South China Sea International Conference last year. We will continue to demonstrate our support and to stand up for the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and non-aggression. We will continue to oppose any action that raises tensions or the risks of miscalculation. Where this involves calling out actions that undermine these principles and that are dangerous, we do so. Alongside our G7 partners in the Hiroshima Leaders Communique, the UK reaffirmed the importance of UNCLOS and reiterated that the 2016 Arbitral Award is a significant milestone, which is legally binding upon the parties to those proceedings and a useful basis for peacefully resolving disputes between the parties. We stand up for international maritime law in our words, but also in our actions. The 2021 deployment of our carrier strike group, in which we engage over 40 countries, and the long-term deployment of 2 offshore patrol vessels, HMS Bay and HMS Tamar, has not just allowed us to further defense engagement across the region, but enabled us to walk the talk, in particular on freedom of navigation. Following HMS Queen Elizabeth, our 5th generation aircraft carrier and her strike group's visits in 2021, we will be sending another carrier strike group to the Indo-Pacific in 2025. We note that the Philippines has also taken the bold step to stand up with confidence in support of international law in the South China Sea. We applaud this and the resolve shown by this administration in this regard. Beyond that, we believe that building closer bilateral, minilateral, multilateral partnerships with regional partners will be key to support peace and stability throughout the region. Indeed, these partnerships and their cohesiveness are key, so that those who threaten, coerce, intimidate, or use force feel the unity and the resolve of those who uphold the purposes and the principles of the UN Charter. We are already building these alliances through landmark agreements and partnerships, including AUKUS with the US and Australia, and the Global Combat Air Program with Japan and Italy. We firmly believe that these not only show our resolve, but have a stabilizing effect in the region. These partnerships are important, but we do not leave it at that. We believe in working with partners to strengthen our collective capabilities. Here in the Philippines, we are working alongside partners to build the capability of the Philippines to defend its territory. We are increasing bilateral defense engagement across the air, land, and maritime domains with periodic visits by Royal Navy ships, visits and engagements by defense leaders, and specialist training teams. building military capability through provision of international defense training in the UK, the Philippines, and the region, focusing on developing specialist skills and professional military education for future commanders, and pursuing joint exercises and capitalizing on opportunities to observe other military exercises in the UK, the Philippines, and the Indo-Pacific. But it's not just about hard-edge security. We are also offering our expertise in areas such as maritime domain awareness, IUU fishing, and tackling environmental damage to coastal areas through our world-renowned agencies, such as the Royal Navy's MDA team and the UK's Hydrographic Office. But it is also the economy, economic resilience, and economic security that matters. Indeed, these are the modern nomenclature of conflict and the areas we must invest in to absolutely prevent said conflict. Across the world, we are seeing an rise in incidents of economic coercion that seek to exploit economic vulnerabilities and dependencies and undermine the foreign and domestic policies and sovereignties of countries around the world. We categorically oppose this behavior, regardless of which country engages in them. We are committed to ensure that attempts to weaponize economic dependencies will fail and face consequences. So as the UK, we will boost economic growth and opportunities through high-quality trade agreements, digital partnerships. We're working to unlock investments and collaborating with innovative private sector partners to develop and grow successful UK and Indo-Pacific partnerships. At Hiroshima, G7 leaders launched a new coordination platform on economic coercion. As part of this, leaders committed to further promote cooperation with partners beyond the G7 and to coordinate as appropriate support to targeted states, economies, and entities as a demonstration of solidarity and resolve to uphold the rule of law. Through continuing to build strong partnerships and collaboration in this way, together, we can ensure a more stable, peaceful, and prosperous future for all of us in a free and open Indo-Pacific. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Lore Bofis. Our next speaker will talk about India's Act East policy, achieving common prosperity and security for all. We are definitely honored to introduce our last speaker for this session, His Excellency Shambhu Kumaran, the Ambassador of India to the Philippines.
Namaste and mabuhay to everyone. Good morning. Thank you to Professor Dindo Manheth and all the colleagues at Stratbase for this invitation. Really honored to join all my colleagues here, and let me convey my greetings to all representatives of the Philippines government, armed forces, Coast Guard, colleagues from the media, and diplomatic colleagues. Like others, let me also begin by saying that today's event is a fitting tribute to the legacy of one of the flag bearers of Philippines diplomacy, Mr. Albert del Rosario. And I think we celebrate in this discussion one of his signature achievements, the Arbitral Award. I've been asked to speak a bit about India's Act East policy and how that fits in with the larger construct of the Indo-Pacific. As some of you may be aware, the Act East policy initially began in the early 90s as an economic initiative as India opened up its economy. And it focused primarily on trade and investment, and of course, to rediscover some of our civilizational and cultural connections with the Southeast Asian region and with ASEAN at the core. Over the years, this agenda has broadened and the scope has also expanded in geographical terms to cover Japan, Korea, and China, and increasingly also the Pacific Island countries. The agenda of the Act East policy has also expanded to include connectivity, people-to-people ties, and development cooperation. And more recently, there's also an increasing stress on defense and security engagement, specifically focused on ADR, counterterrorism, maritime security. We in India recognize that a significant portion of our interests lie to our east. And even as we were building the process and structures of engagement, the landscape of the region has evolved considerably. There are larger ongoing trends towards global and regional economic and political rebalancing. And therefore, India's policies have had to adapt. As the Japanese colleague said, late Prime Minister Abe of Japan, speaking in India's parliament, spoke about in 2007 the confluence of the two seas. And this has unfolded quite rapidly as connectivity, supply chains have all become linked, and regional developments are having a greater impact even beyond the region. This makes, therefore, the Indo-Pacific a very practical and relevant frame of reference. And in any case, looking at the Indian Ocean and the Pacific as distinct compartments is not tenable anymore. In a broader way, the separation of the Pacific and the Indian Ocean was perhaps an outcome of US strategic dominance that existed since 1945, but the past 3 decades have seen visible changes in the US repositioning, the growth of China, and its policies towards the region, as well as the rising role of Japan and Australia and South Korea and other actors, including our European partners who are well represented today. More importantly, I think the broadening outlook of ASEAN itself has driven this transformation. Thus, I would say that India's Act East policy today has expanded to an Indo-Pacific policy. We see the growth and opportunities in this broader region, and one that we see extending from the shores of Eastern Africa to the western shores of America. And some of our colleagues have already spoken, so I would not detail the importance of this region for the world, but just to say that both in terms of population, GDP growth, and in terms of security, really this region is the fulcrum of global developments. Accordingly, our responses and analytical policy frameworks have adjusted. Today, we have a broader and more comprehensive engagement, one that recognizes the interplay of economic partnerships and security requirements, and one that seeks multiple pathways for engagement. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in speaking in Mauritius in 2015, coined the acronym SAGAR, which stood for Security and Growth for All in the Region. And it envisaged a free, open, inclusive, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific, one that is built on a rules-based international order, sustainable and transparent infrastructure investment, freedom of navigation overflight, unimpeded lawful commerce, mutual respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, peaceful resolution of disputes, as well as equality of all nations, big and small. To give concrete shape to this vision, we have taken multiple initiatives. We announced the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative at the 14th East Asia Summit in Bangkok in November 2019. At the plurilateral level, we have actively engaged with large fellow democracies through the Quad mechanism with the US, Japan, and Australia. And we also have engaged actively with ASEAN in multiple dialogue pathways. And underpinning our engagement with ASEAN is a set of strong bilateral partnerships, such as with the Philippines. And allow me to take a couple of minutes just to say that I do believe that the India-Philippines relationship has entered its best phase ever. We just had 2 weeks ago a joint commission meeting in Delhi with Secretary Manalo. And the joint statement that we issued at the conclusion of that meeting reflects the enormous dynamism and diversification of our partnership. In terms of today's discussion specifically, we've had a growing defense and security engagement. We are on the verge of an inaugural maritime affairs dialogue that will cover both maritime security, but also broader areas in the maritime domain, recognizing the importance of the maritime domain for both India and the Philippines. We also are looking forward to greater engagement in terms of maritime security, joint exercises, engagements between our coast guards, and so on. Let me take a few minutes also to say that today's discussion on the Arbitral Award is a reflection of the broader approach that both India and ASEAN have taken, and our bilateral relations with the Philippines as well. And accordingly, I think in the joint statement, we did recognize the need for adherence to international law and called for the Arbitral Award to be respected in that context. Some of you in the Philippines may not be aware that India and India also entered into an arbitration process through the PCA around the same time with Bangladesh for the delimitation of our maritime boundary. And the judgment in that award was not entirely in India's favor. In fact, I would go so far to say that Bangladesh had the better of the award. But we have recognized and implemented that award. And I think that brings me to my final set of observations, which is to reiterate that all countries have an obligation to respect international law, but perhaps bigger countries have a larger obligation to respect international law. And that in adhering to agreements that have already been signed and in implementing them is the real test of state behavior. Unfortunately, that has not always been the case in our region, but we do hope that with discussions such as this one, where we reiterate the will of the international community to have a concerted and coordinated approach to ensure that all actors, big and small, adhere to the rule of law and to a rules-based international order. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Shambu Kumaran. And again, a warm round of applause to all our speakers today for, yes, for their very powerful and strong statements. We would also like to we have a special greeting for the military personnel in the BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal. They are actually watching us right now, live via Zoom. So, yes. Thank you also to our military personnel for guarding, for taking care of our territory in that area. So again, at this point, we would like to once again invite our esteemed speakers on stage for a photo opportunity. May we call on, again, our speakers, please? Ambassador HKU, Ambassador Koshikawa Kazuhiko, Ambassador Luc Veron, Ambassador Michelle Bocoz, Ambassador Lor Bofis, Ambassador Shambu Kumaran, and Professor Dindo Manhit.
think Ambassador Michel just here as well.
And maybe also invite our other our ambassadors, please, to get up on stage with us. Sir, Sir Ambassador Anka is there also. Is in there. Show of force.
We're just gonna have to
Stay here, sir.
TV wants the shot.
She ran. No, I don't have anything else. I'm going back to the office.
Wait.
Are you all staying? No, other stuff to do. Yeah. I'm staying. Okay. Great shoot.
Hello. Hi, everyone. May we request everyone to please take your seat. We will now start the second session of our of this morning. Again, may we request everyone to please take your seats so we can start the second segment of our morning session.
May and I are responsible for relationship
Trabaho na tayo. Okay. Um, we will start in 5 minutes. May we request everyone to please take your seats. Sir, saan niyo saan mo ako? All right, may we request everyone to please take your seats. Can will I'll ask them to set your off. Just we'll do that soon. Okay, may we request everyone to please take your seat. We will now start the second segment of our morning session. Okay? All right, welcome back to today's forum entitled The Seventh Year of the Arbitral Victory Defending the West Philippine Sea, the Indo-Pacific, and the Rules-Based Order. That was quite a packed morning we just had, and I could feel the energy in the air. We're all in high spirits right now. And again, thank you all for coming in our event this morning. So the support, as we know, the support of the international community is very crucial in defending a rules-based international order. Aside from the members of the diplomatic community, we are also pleased to have leading experts from world-renowned think tanks to share their latest research and assessments on the global effort to recalibrate strategies towards the Indo-Pacific. Today, we will be having guests from the Philippines, Japan, South Korea, and the United States. And yes, they will be broadcasting live via Zoom from their respective countries. And their expertise in the fields of foreign policy and international affairs are very vital in today's discussions. So to continue our morning session on maritime security in the Philippines and the Indo-Pacific, may we call on our next speaker, Dr. Ronald Holmes. Dr. Holmes is currently the president of the Pulse Asia Research Inc. in the Philippines and is a full professor at the Department of Political Science and Development Studies at the De La Salle University in Manila. To talk about prioritizing the national interests in Philippine foreign policy, joining us all the way from Japan, let's all welcome Dr. Ronald Holmes. Dr.
Excellencies, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. You may proceed.
Excellencies, the officials of the Philippine government, our colleagues and friends from the academe and civil society, media, and the other guests, magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. After listening to the statements of the ambassadors, Australia, Japan, the European Union, France, the United Kingdom, and India, I cannot help but feel more secure that there is clearly a broader alliance that will push for a rules-based order, and in doing so, assist us in securing our own territorial integrity. Let me proceed with fulfilling my task for today. I've been requested by stat-based ADRi to present findings related on questions that are related to the country's territorial integrity that we fielded in our June Ulat ng Bayan survey, the People's Report survey, with a sample size of 1,200 respondents, 300 in each of the subnational areas. So let me proceed. Before I go to the stat-based question, let me just show what we had already released to media yesterday, to public, when we presented our respondents with a list of 16 national concerns. Filipinos still basically urge the national administration to address material or gap issues. These are the high prices of commodities, the pay of workers, job creation, and poverty reduction. Though the defense of the country's territorial integrity was regarded as in need of immediate action or attention only by 1 out of 10 Filipinos, I think this sentiment indicates that more Filipinos think that the issue is being addressed or has been addressed relative to the other urgent concerns. This interpretation is validated by the current rating of the national administration's performance in addressing this issue. As one will see in this chart, the national administration in both the March 2023 and the June 2023 surveys garnered majority approval on its defense of the country's territorial integrity. There was a bit of ambivalence expressed by 3 out of 10 Filipinos, but the disapproval on the administration's performance in defending our country's territorial integrity has gone down from a low double digit to a single digit marginally in the June survey. In the June survey, we also fielded 2 questions that were commissioned by stat-based ADRi. The first is on whether Filipinos agree with the need to form alliance with like-minded nations. As shown in this chart, a significant majority of Filipinos agree that the country must form and strengthen its alliance with countries of similar beliefs or perspective to protect our territorial and economic rights in the West Philippine Sea. The level of agreement is constant across all subnational areas and socioeconomic classes. Around 2 out of 10 Filipinos are ambivalent as regards forging alliances, but virtually no one disagrees with the creation or sustenance of such alliances. The second question, commissioned by SWAT-based, is on measures that the Marcos administration must take to effectively address our West Philippine Sea concerns. As you will find in this chart, regardless of area and socioeconomic class, majority to a significant majority of Filipinos agree that the country should take 3 of the 5 measures presented as possible means to address our concerns in the West Philippine Sea. These are to build the military capability of the various branches of the armed forces and also the Coast Guard. The second one, and this has been conducted increasingly over the past few months and the years, to conduct more maritime patrols and military exercises with allied countries. And the last one is to shift the focus of the defense policy, including resources to external threats. While fewer than a majority in the National Capital Region in Mindanao identified the need to fully implement the VFA-EDCA, a higher proportion of Filipinos in the balance of Luzon and the Visayas urged the Marcos administration to take on this measure. These are the results of our June 2023 survey on issues related to territorial integrity. Thank you very much. Mabuhay.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ronald Holmes. And I'm sorry about that, had to take a quick break. All right, so to continue our morning session on maritime security cooperation, we would like to call on our next speaker. He is former Ambassador Scott Marshall. He served as the United States Ambassador to ASEAN from 2008 to 2010, while serving concurrently as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Southeast Asia from 2007 to 2010. Afterwards, he served as the United States Ambassador to Indonesia from 2010 to 2013. He is also currently a senior advisor to Bauer Group Asia. Joining us all the way from the Bay Area in the United States, he will be talking about developments in pursuing diplomacy in Southeast Asia. Let's all welcome Ambassador Scott Marshall.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much to Strat-Base ADR Institute for inviting me to join you on this really important conference. Good morning, magandang umaga. I've been asked to speak about the diplomatic developments related to the South China Sea or West Philippine Sea. And the first thing that strikes me as maybe most remarkable is actually how little traditional diplomacy there has been in the last year or two to try to directly resolve the South China Sea dispute. As you all know, ASEAN's main diplomatic thrust has been to continue to try to conclude a code of conduct with China that would govern behavior among the claimant nations pending a full resolution of this dispute. This follows the declaration of conduct that was signed way back in 2002 that was supposed to lead, we thought, a little bit faster to this code of conduct. But now these code of conduct negotiations have been going on for more than 15 years. There's no way to describe it other than glacial progress. And after some progress, the claimants finally reached agreement on a text in 2018. But that doesn't mean there's an agreement. It's only a text to negotiate off of. And then early this year, ASEAN and China agreed to try to move the talks forward and to finish the second reading of this text at the end of the year. There's still really important differences between the ASEAN claimants, Southeast Asian claimants, and China, notably over the scope, the geographic scope of what the code of conduct would cover, as well as whether it would be legally binding. Some friends in ASEAN insist that the code of conduct is really the only way forward. Others say Beijing's simply using it to stall while it seeks to assert de facto control in the South China Sea. I am very much in the latter camp. I don't think China has any real interest in concluding these negotiations, certainly not until it really has asserted control. But nonetheless, that's sort of ASEAN's main diplomatic approach. Likewise, there's not really been any real movement on the legal front over the past year. The Philippines and some other ASEAN members, along with the United States and several others, continue to insist that the 2015 arbitral ruling is final and binding, while China continues to say, no, we don't accept it. So it might be clear to all of us that legally it's binding, but as long as China refuses to accept it, that doesn't really lead us anywhere. There's also been, I would say, almost no progress on any bilateral negotiations between any Southeast Asian claimants and China. Earlier this year, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim visited Beijing, I think it was in April, and said he was, quote, open to negotiations on the claims. But then he quickly pulled back because he got a lot of domestic criticism for having said he was open to negotiations. There's been any number of other high-level meetings between Southeast Asian claimant states and China, but as far as I can see, no tangible progress as a result of those discussions. And the Shangri-La dialogue held last month in Singapore, I think, highlighted the lack of diplomatic progress with China, the United States, the Philippines, many other countries, all basically restating their positions, but no real movement or signs of an opening that could lead to progress. So most of the South China Sea or West Philippine Sea related diplomacy has been either among the Southeast Asian claimant states themselves or between those states and outside powers. I would say most notably, in my view, Indonesia and Vietnam in December of last year reached agreement after 12 years of negotiations on delineating their respective exclusive economic zones. And this is a small but important step, in my view, that could set a precedent for other Southeast Asian claimants. If all the Southeast Asian claimants can agree among themselves on their EEZ limits, I think this would be a significant step forward and would put more pressure on China. Also, as you've heard, I'm sure Indonesia recently pushed for the first ever ASEAN joint naval drill in the waters of the North Natuna Sea, including in areas that fall within China's 9-dash line. Cambodia, in the end, resisted, and so ASEAN had to shift the location further south. But I think this is still a potentially significant development and worth following closely in this week and in the weeks and months ahead. Another important development that you've already heard some about today, and I'm sure you'll hear more about later, is the increased effort by Southeast Asian claimants, particularly the Philippines and Vietnam, to bolster their diplomatic and security relationships with outside powers. And here, the Philippines under President Marcos has been most ambitious, in my view, with renewed efforts to implement and expand the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement with the United States, including access to four Philippine bases, 4 additional Philippine bases, along with the U.S. commitment to invest some $100 million to upgrade those bases. And this was, of course, accompanied by President Marcos's visit to the White House and President Biden's strong affirmation of the United States' ironclad commitment to the Philippines. But the Philippines has also bolstered ties with Australia and Japan. Again, you heard from their ambassadors this morning. And recently participated in the first quadrilateral US, Japan, Australia, Philippines meeting of defense chiefs on the margins of the Shangri-La dialogue, plus the first ever US, Japan, Philippines trilateral security dialogue held by national security advisors. Philippine-Indian relations have also strengthened, with India in a joint statement saying for the first time that the arbitral ruling of 2015 should be honored. Vietnam also has been bolstering its ties with Japan and especially with India, with a series of high-level security meetings and India pledging to provide a ship and missiles to Vietnam. The U.S. has also increased security cooperation with Vietnam with a recent aircraft carrier visit and actual U.S. warplanes, for the first time I can remember, actually landing in Vietnam. And interestingly, the Philippines and Vietnam have stepped up their own bilateral dialogue with a series of meetings, which I think is really important and has the potential to lead to further progress. You see other Southeast Asian claimants and even non-claimants like Indonesia, which claims not to be a claimant, it's a bit confusing, also bolstering their security ties, but maybe not quite as aggressively. And you see the continuing development of AUKUS and the Quad, which are not explicitly linked to the South China Sea, but that highlight how China's assertiveness is bringing others closer together diplomatically and in terms of security cooperation. And all of this, of course, takes place in the context of growing U.S.-Chinese tensions and competition on everything from what's happening in Taiwan to the South China Sea to economics and technology. U.S.-China direct talks have been limited in general, although I was happy to see Secretary Blinken's and Secretary Yellen's recent visits to Beijing that at least seem to have reestablished communication lines, which is hugely important. But as far as I know, no reported progress on differences over the South China Sea and many other issues. Beijing is still refusing to restart defense discussions with us, which is concerning. The South China Sea issue is just one of many areas of disagreement and tension. Now, I'm not suggesting that Southeast Asia or even most Southeast Asian claimant states are shifting away from China and toward the United States because of this. It's much more complicated than that. China is still a key partner economically and diplomatically for, I think, all of Southeast Asia. And my discussion suggests that all Southeast Asian nations want to have good relations with China as well as with the United States. So they're trying to navigate through this period of tension between the great powers and doing everything they can to reduce tensions. But the growing ties between the claimant states of Southeast Asia, including the Philippines and Vietnam and others, with external partners, to me is a clear indication that China's assertiveness and the lack of prospects for diplomacy to resolve the issue is causing even cautious Southeast Asian nations not only to bolster their own security capabilities, but to partner more closely with the United States, Japan, Australia, India, and the EU, as well as with each other on the security front. Last thing I would say is I don't have a readout from today's ASEAN Foreign Ministers retreat, but I would assume that this topic is going to be the subject of much discussion at that event and then later in the week at the ASEAN Regional Forum and the East Asia Summit. I would be greatly surprised if there was any kind of diplomatic breakthrough. So I expect we're going to see more of what we've been seeing in recent months in the weeks and months ahead. With that, let me stop. Thank you very much. And I neglected to say at the outset also, I'd like to also add my respects to Albert del Rosario. I was fortunate enough to get to know him quite well and to work with him. What a wonderful gentleman, as well as a great patriot of the Philippines and a good friend of the United States. So with that, thank you very much. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Scott Marshall. Our next speaker is Dr. Wong-Gi Cho. He is a professor and the head of the Center for ASEAN India Studies of the Institute of Foreign Affairs and National Security at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy in Seoul. Today, he will also be joining us all the way from Seoul, South Korea, to talk about foreign policy trends and movements in East and Southeast Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Dr. Wong-Gi Cho.
Thank you. Greetings from Seoul. And my big congratulations to my good friend Dindo for organizing today's event. It is a great honor for me to speak today at this prestigious meeting commemorating the Arbitral Award that is a significant victory for the Philippines' efforts to defend and fight for its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Well, Chinese government always say that other countries should respect its core interests and legitimate security concerns. By the same token, I think it is absolutely necessary and required that China should also respect Philippines' core interests and legitimate concerns about the Western Philippine Sea. Furthermore, China should respect international law, UNCLOS, and arbitral, and should stop doing the aggressive actions and behaviors that it is doing in the South China Sea and Western Philippine Sea. Well, today I was asked actually to speak about Korea's new regional strategy, which is Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy, announced December last year, and the new ASEAN policy, which is called Korea ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, KASI for short. Well, the new Korean Indo-Pacific strategy, I think, represents Korea's significant strategic repositioning from the previous passive and even reticent stance on engaging in regional, strategic, and security affairs in the region to a proactive posture toward joining forces with like-minded countries in collective efforts for shaping the regional rules-based order. Well, if you look at Korea's new Indo-Pacific strategy document, the document starts with this statement. The Republic of Korea is an Indo-Pacific nation, and our interests are directly tied to the stability and prosperity in the region. I think this is very important and significant statement that shows that the Korean government now recognizes that its foremost important strategic interests lie in the peace and stability of the Indo-Pacific region. And furthermore, Korean strategy, foreign policy stance now firmly based on the recognition that the strategic stability of the region and the rules-based order is very important, but which is not anymore take for granted. In that regard, I think Korean government under this new strategic orientation is committed to pursue a foreign policy that is firmly based on the new on the rules-based order. So in this respect, I think the Korea's new Indo-Pacific strategy clearly articulates the regional order vision of a rules-based order as its central pillar. The strategy made clear that Seoul's primary strategic interests lie in ensuring rules-based order, and Korea is committed to join forces with like-minded partners who share the same strategic interest in bolstering rules-based order. So I think this strategy is a significant, as I pointed before, departure from the previous stance of strategic ambiguity between Washington and Beijing. I think this is why the Korean Foreign Minister, Mr. Park Jin, has called the new Indo-Pacific strategy as the new foreign policy doctrine of Yoon Suk-yeol government in Korea. Now, let me briefly touch upon the new Korean policy toward ASEAN under this broader regional strategy. Well, President Yoon stressed that the ASEAN is Seoul's key partner in our Indo-Pacific strategy, and we will continue to place priority on ASEAN in the coming years. And the KASI, the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, will be the key platform to materialize Seoul's continued commitment to ASEAN partners. I think the KASI under the Yoon government, the new ASEAN approach has a strong element of continuity and builds on our previous approach. Well, the element of continuity is a Korea's strong commitment to foster the economic cooperation and development cooperation with ASEAN partners. But I think there is one very important element that stands apart from the previous approach, which is a strategic and security element of the new ASEAN approach. In the past, Korea typically regards and perceives ASEAN partners as an economic partner and focusing on the just trade and investment kind of cooperation. But the KASI on the new Indo-Pacific strategy stress the strategic and security element and cooperation. Well, the Yoon government in Korea now takes a strategic outlook and approach toward the ASEAN region and therefore aspires to pursue a comprehensive strategic partnership. Well, if you look at the information brochure of the new Korea's ASEAN approach, KASI, there are 8 priorities, and out of these 8 priorities, you have the third priority, which is to expand ASEAN Korea comprehensive security cooperation. Here, in this priority, the Korean government says that it intends to augment its strategic relevance in the region by broadening the scope of strategic cooperation with ASEAN on regional security issues and contribute to the rules-based international order. It stresses that the comprehensive security cooperation plan includes the support for ASEAN member countries' maritime law enforcement and capacity building through cooperation on transfer of decommissioned ships, the logistical supplies, training for counterterrorism, counter-piracy, and search and rescue operations. It also includes the elements of taking active part in joint naval exercises organized and participated by the ASEAN member countries. And also it includes bilateral setting up new bilateral channels of maritime cooperation and enhance the existing policy dialogue on maritime affairs with Philippines. South Korean government in particular established a new dialogue of maritime issues with Philippines, the Korea-Philippine Maritime Dialogue last year. So I think this year we'll have the second iteration of the new maritime dialogue with the Philippines. And also, there is the fourth priority in the new Korean approach, which is to promote ASEAN-ROC strategic coordination. Here, Korean government emphasized that the Korean government will expand the channels and platforms of communication with ASEAN partners, especially with regard to the security and defense cooperation. So here, in this regard, I think the new Korean Indo-Pacific strategy and the new ASEAN policy, which is the KASI, the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, Korean government is very much committed to expand its level and depth of engagement in regional security and strategic affairs, including the South China Sea issue. But I think because I mean these new initiatives are just started off, I think you need to see how Korean government actually going forward formulate and implement these new commitments. Well, in this reason, for that matter, I think this week we'll have the ASEAN-related meetings. The foreign minister, Korean Foreign Minister Park Jin will travel to Indonesia this week, and I think I hope that he makes a more proactive kind of engagement with the ASEAN partners. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wongi Cho. Now, our next speaker is Mr. Sotaro Ozaki, Director of Research Coordination at the Japan Institute of International Affairs since 2022. He will also be joining us all the way from Japan to talk about the US, Japan, Philippines trilateral cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. Let us all give a warm round of applause to Mr. Sotaro Ozaki.
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. My name is Sotaro Ozaki, Director of Japan Institute of International Affairs. First of all, I would like to thank Stratwest Albert de Rosario Institute for the invitation to this conference. And first, I would like to mention the significance of the Arbitral award regarding the South China Sea, the number one. Today, 7 years have passed since the issuance of the Arbitral Tribunal's award. As the Tribunal's award is final and legally binding on the parties to the dispute under the provisions of UNCLOS, so the parties to this case, namely the Philippines and China, are required to comply with the award. The claim by China that it will not accept the award is against the principle of peaceful settlement on disputes in accordance with international law, in particular UNCLOS, and undermines the rule of law as a fundamental value of the international community. So we strongly hope that the parties' compliance with the award will lead to the peaceful settlement of dispute in the South China Sea. So we highly appreciate the government of the Philippines for having consistently complied with the award and shown its commitment to the peaceful settlement of disputes in the South China Sea. Given the universality and comprehensiveness of UNCLOS, all maritime claims must be based on the relevant provisions of UNCLOS. We must keep our objection to maritime claims in the South China Sea that are inconsistent with UNCLOS. The current situation remains seriously concerning. Furthermore, we must reiterate a strong opposition to unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force or coercion. So, number two, Japan-US Philippine Trilateral Cooperation. First, I must mention the fact that these three countries' national security advisors, namely Jake Sullivan of the United States, Akio Takeba of Japan, and Eduardo Añón of the Philippines, gathered for the first time on 16 June this year in Tokyo to exchange views on a concrete approach for improving trilateral cooperation. They reaffirmed the importance of deepening trilateral cooperation among Japan, US, and Philippines, which share fundamental values of freedom, democracy, and respect for human rights, in order to maintain and strengthen a free and open international order. They emphasize the importance of enhancing trilateral cooperation and response capabilities based on the Japan-US alliance and Philippine-US alliance in order to maintain peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. Also, they concurred that a free and open maritime order characterized by freedom of navigation and a free, fair, equitable economic order are essential in the Indo-Pacific, especially given unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force or coercion. And they also discussed a wide range of regional security challenges, including with respect to the South China Sea and the East China Sea, as well as North Korea. In addition, they reiterated that the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. So the following four efforts, these one, are listed to enhance trilateral cooperation. The first one, regarding the first one, trilateral defense and security capabilities. The three national security advisors discussed opportunities to conduct combined maritime activities, including multilateral joint naval exercises in Indo-Pacific waters in support of freedom of navigation and the broader rule-based order. They resolved to advance trilateral defense cooperation based on the recent progress between the US and the Philippines, such as the 4 additional locations identified pursuant to their enhanced defense cooperation agreement, and between Japan and the Philippines in discussing frameworks that will enhance and facilitate reciprocal visit of defense and military officials. And the second one, in order to maintain a free and open maritime order, it is quite important that the first trilateral joint training among the three countries' coast guards was conducted in early June. Ambassador Koshikawa mentioned earlier. They also reaffirmed the importance of efforts to promote maritime domain awareness by utilizing Japan's new offshore security assistance cooperation framework and the Quad's Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness and other capacity building measures. And the third one, the humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, they resolved to deepen trilateral cooperation in this area, drawing on their military and civilian capabilities. And the fourth one, a free and equitable economic order. They resolved to make common efforts to promote economic security and economic resilience. They affirmed their commitment to addressing economic coercion in coordination with other partners. In addition to these 4 efforts, I think we need to find ways to deter China's gray zone coercion aligned with international law, including the 2016 South China Sea Arbitration Award. In the East China Sea, Chinese Coast Guard vessels are coming almost every day around Senkaku Islands. We should also strengthen mechanisms to share and publicize information on Chinese gray zone activities. In South China Sea, the Philippines' ability to maintain a robust military and law enforcement presence is vital to defend maritime security and freedom of the seas. So Japan and the US should accelerate capacity building efforts for the Philippines military and law enforcement agencies. Japan's early conclusion of Reciprocal Access Agreement, RAA, with the Philippines would also contribute to regional peace and stability. And I think a possible Taiwan contingency will surely affect Japan's security. In this event, China would try to neutralize the Philippines. Japan and the US should enhance economic support to the Philippines so that Philippines can become more resilient to Chinese coercion. From this point of view, Japan should take advantage of the newly set up offshore security assistance scheme to aid the Philippines. And thirdly, I would like to briefly mention Japan's new national security strategy, which is revised last December, this one. The newly formulated national security strategy discusses security developments involving China, North Korea, and Russia in that order. China's attempts to change the status quo in the Senkaku Islands and Spratly Islands and its increasing pressure on Taiwan are described as a matter of serious concern for Japan and the international community, and an unprecedented and the greatest strategic challenge. North Korea. North Korea's expanded nuclear missile operational capability has resulted in it being described as an even more grave and imminent threat to Japan's national security than ever before. It seems that North Korea has launched another ballistic missile this morning. And Russia's continued aggression against Ukraine is a threat to Europe and a strong security concern in the Indo-Pacific region, including Japan, coupled with its strategic coordination with China. In response to these security challenges, diplomatic capabilities are listed as the first item of the main elements of comprehensive national power, and Japan's priority strategic approach is diplomacy. Diplomacy to prevent crisis, proactively create a peaceful and stable international environment, and strengthen the free and open international order, focusing on strengthening the Japan-US alliance and the cooperation with Australia, Philippines, and other like-minded countries. This national security strategy then notably advocates the fundamental reinforcement of defense capabilities as the last guarantee of national security, and asserts the need to possess counter-strike capabilities that leverage standoff defense capability, among others. The development and prototype production of upgraded Type 1-2 surface-to-ship missiles, and the introduction of Tomahawk cruise missiles are explicitly mentioned in the defense build-up programs. The national security strategy also states that in fiscal year 2027, Japan will take the necessary measures to make the level of its budget for both the fundamental reinforcement of the defense capabilities and complementary initiatives reach 2% of the current GDP. In the Japanese defense build-up program, the amount of money required for defense build-up over the 5-year period, fiscal year 2023 to 2027, is estimated to be around 43 trillion yen. Okay, let me stop here. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Sotaro Ozaki. Our next speaker is Dr. Lowell Bautista, an associate professor in the School of Law of the University of Wollongong, Australia. Today, he will talk about ocean governance and maritime security in international law. Joining us virtually all the way from Australia, ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Dr. Lowell Bautista.
Good morning. It is my honor and privilege to share my thoughts with all of you today. And I convey my sincere appreciation to Strat-based ADR Institute for the kind invitation to join such a distinguished panel of speakers Truly, I'm very humbled. I also wish to honor the legacy of Secretary Albert de Rosario, who I very deeply respect. Please allow me to preface this brief remark with a quote from Arthur C. Clarke, who is an English science fiction writer, a futurist, an inventor, and undersea explorer. He co-wrote the screenplay for the 1968 film 2001: A Space Odyssey, which I hope some of you would have read or seen, and it's widely regarded as one of the most influential films of all time. Arthur Clarke says that new ideas pass through three periods. The first period, people say it cannot be done. And in the second period, people would say it probably can be done, but it's not worth doing. And in the third and final period, people will say, I knew it was a good idea all along. And today, as we commemorate the 7th year anniversary of the South China Sea arbitration, we can all agree, I know, that we have reached the third period of the lifetime of an idea. And that is, everyone will say, as we've heard this morning, that the idea of filing a case against China over the West Philippine Sea was a good idea all along. And closer to home, and if I may borrow the words of Judge Raul Pangalangan, who we will hear from in the afternoon session, in his 2002 book, which I happen to have here, entitled Philippine Materials in International Law, on page 1, he says, the 2016 decision by the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague on the dispute with China is the shining moment of the Philippines in international law. And he says it's a victory that couldn't have been won without what Secretary Albert de Rosario called the equalizing power of international law, end of quote. And today I'm reminded also of a proverbial expression, success has 1,000 fathers, or Richard Dawkins' famous words, yesterday's dangerous idea is today's orthodoxy and tomorrow's cliche. And indeed, ideas need to be dangerous. Ideas, even though they can be dangerous, have the potential to bring about transformative changes. History provides us with illustrations of how powerful ideas have shaped the world, ended wars, and contributed to the betterment of society. I've been asked today to speak on the topic of ocean governance and maritime security and international law, and the excellent presentations before me make my task all the more easy, and hopefully you can still learn something from this presentation. And today, in the time given and time remaining, I wish to emphasize just 3 points. The first point is that ocean governance, maritime security, and international law are intrinsically interconnected. They form the backbone of a cohesive framework that safeguards our seas. Ocean governance guided by international law establishes regulations and mechanisms to ensure responsible resource management, protect the marine environment, and resolve disputes peacefully. By upholding international law, states promote maritime security through the preservation of freedom of navigation, prevention of conflicts, and combating maritime crimes. Conversely, effective maritime security enhances the effectiveness of ocean governance by creating a stable environment for the implementation of regulations and the pursuit of sustainable practices. Together, these elements form a symbiotic relationship, ensuring the preservation of our oceans, promoting cooperation among nations, and upholding a rules-based order in the maritime domain. Ocean governance is essentially multifaceted in nature. It encompasses not only the regulatory frameworks and mechanisms, but also the power dynamics and strategic considerations that shape maritime affairs. And as we reflect upon the arbitration victory, we must delve into the theoretical underpinnings of international law, international relations, geopolitics, and political science even, to gain a comprehensive understanding of the broader context in which the defense of the West Philippine Sea, the Indo-Pacific, and the rules-based order are situated. In my opinion, we will not enjoy the seas without securing our oceans. We will not enjoy a secure ocean without a safe sea, and we will not enjoy either without international law. The ocean requires a collective approach based on the provisions of international law and with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea at its core. The second point I wish to say is that geopolitics and geostrategic competition, which we have heard of from a lot of the speakers today, between China and the United States, significantly shape our understanding of ocean governance and maritime security in the Indo-Pacific region. One of the most remarkable characteristics and change in the Indo-Pacific region is that the number of players and issue linkages have increased dramatically and diversified. Against the backdrop of Sino-US hegemonic competition, many middle powers, including the Philippines, and multilateral bodies have emerged in the regional chessboard. The complex interplay between these two major powers, driven by strategic interest, influences the dynamics of maritime disputes, resource competition, and regional power dynamics. as they seek to safeguard their respective interests, their actions and policies have far-reaching implications for the rules-based order, regional stability, and the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. Understanding and analyzing this geopolitical rivalry is crucial for comprehending the complexities of ocean governance, ensuring maritime security, and fostering cooperative approaches that can mitigate tensions and promote a stable and prosperous maritime domain. In the dynamic multipolar world, as Professor Manhit mentioned this morning, we can see ever tightening linkages among the economy, security, technology, and values. Whilst the US-China competition creates a huge centralizing power or gravity, the spread of wealth and technology have also formed a decentralizing force in the region. It is also notable that the Indo-Pacific Oceans themselves present a main point of departure among different countries and players. Among others, the sea lanes of communication holds major risks and challenges to coastal countries in the region. It is therefore not a coincidence that both China and the US, their competition and tension revolve around the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. The balance of power is shifting, it's obvious to everyone, from unipolar to bipolar and eventually to a multipolar system. It cannot be denied that the Sino-US rivalry creates enormous gravitational force. However, regardless of their hegemonic ambitions, there are structural, normative, cognitive constraints that the Philippines needs to consider in crafting an independent and balanced foreign policy posture. Above all, the reliance of the Philippines on China for trade and upon the United States to underwrite its external defense and security may need to be reevaluated. The notion that Philippine defense policy rests on the United States' enduring dominance in Asia and its role as the guarantor of Philippine security needs to be tested. The Philippines needs to adopt a prudent and forward-thinking approach, acknowledging the possibility of a shifting geopolitical landscape and the need to consider alternative strategies to ensure its security. Finally, and my third and final point, international law is not a neutral order that states simply follow or ignore. It is indeed an invitation for contestation and contestability. International law is a complex and dynamic system that is shaped by the interactions and interests of different states, international organizations, and other actors. International law, in my opinion, is a sword and a shield. International law possesses a dual nature, serving both as a tool wielded by the powerful and the weapon of the weak. And hopefully we recall the thoughts of our good secretary when we hear those words. And as we have seen in the South China Sea arbitration, litigation is all about values. Often countries, just like us in our personal lives, resort to litigation to pursue a value. Our decisions, in fact, are not always driven by goals, but they're always driven by values. In the context of the West Philippine Sea, islands, particularly disputed ones, always evoke an emotional content, and this is very true for Filipinos, far beyond their material significance. When people think of the national territory or their motherland and pursue its defense, as we have done for the West Philippine Sea, people are moved by the pursuit of something bigger than themselves, and they're driven by a desire to leave a legacy for future generations, or at least not to have the misfortune or ignominy of giving away a piece of national patrimony. In the realm of international relations, ideas matter, and ideas shape not only our understanding of the world, but also our perception of what is attainable within our circumstances. They furnish states with the means to validate their own actions or challenge those of others. While the efficacy of international law in the South China Sea dispute may be subject to debate, as we do today, its significance remains undeniable. The use of international law by small states, such as the Philippines, to hedge against big economically and militarily powerful states validates power asymmetry amongst claimants and non-claimant states. And China's behavior, not just in its provocative acts at sea, which the other speakers have already mentioned, but particularly in the use of diplomatic notes, which I've written upon, demonstrate its confidence and increasingly assertive involvement in engaging and potentially shaping international law, or indeed revising the global order in order to suit and serve its interests. The conduct of China in the South China Sea dispute reveals a preview of China's understanding of its role and place in the international legal order. In conclusion, the 7th year anniversary of the South China Sea arbitration serves as a reminder for us of the importance of ocean governance and maritime security in international law. Defending the West Philippine Sea, in my opinion, safeguarding the Indo-Pacific, and upholding the rule-based order are not mere aspirations, but they're actually obligations that we owe to future generations. By adhering to international law, fostering cooperation, and respecting the rights and interests of all, we can ensure a peaceful and a prosperous maritime domain for years to come. Thank you for your attention. Maraming salamat po.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Lowell Bautista. So at this point, before we proceed to the next part of our program, we would like to acknowledge the presence of some very important people. We are very honored to have with us today some of the members of the UNCLOS team. They are the people who worked very hard to ensure that we have this arbitral victory that we are celebrating right now. They are the people behind the filing of the arbitral tribunal case and the eventual victory. We wouldn't be here today if not for them. So may we request them to stand up, please. We have former Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio, sir. We also have former Foreign Affairs Assistant Secretary Henry Bensurto. Where's, there's Africa. We also have former Armed Forces of the Philippines Chief of Staff, General Emmanuel Bautista. We also have former Presidential Political Affairs Advisor Ronald Llamas. Oh, he's with the Chinese consulate. Okay. Okay. And then we also have former Ambassador Victoria Bataclan. Oh, there. And also legal advisor to the Philippine delegation, Dr. J. Batong Bakal. Dr. J. Dr. J here? Okay, I think he stepped outside. But again, a warm round of applause to our UNCLOS team. Okay. And now, at this point, we will now proceed to our open forum. To moderate the discussion, may we call on Dr. Charmaine Willoughby, Associate Professor in the International Studies Department of the De La Salle University in Manila. Her areas of specialization are ASEAN's external relations, security cooperation, and critical international relations theory. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Charmaine Willoughby.
Thank you very much, Joyce. Good morning to everybody. Before I open the floor for questions, because I'm sure you all have a lot of questions to raise to our Zoom speakers, I would just like to maybe summarize a little bit just to put everything into context before we jump into the questions. In the earlier panel today, we've listened to an esteemed lineup of ambassadors who spoke of examples and illustrations of maritime security cooperation. We've also come to understand that maritime security cooperation is the backbone and the anchor of what we are doing, and it is couched against the rules-based order and international law, which Lowell also spoke about very clearly in the latter panel. We've also seen examples of cooperation initiatives at different levels, at the state level, at the regional level, at the sub-state level even, and Professor Holmes spoke about that earlier. We've seen examples of diplomatic initiatives, freedom of navigation operations, military to military cooperation, the turn to the Indo-Pacific of many countries out there, as well as cooperation in terms of humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. So with that as kind of like the backdrop, I'm now opening the floor for questions. Please kindly keep your questions short, introduce yourself, and tell us your affiliation. And I believe that there will be a mic that will be passed around, thank you, for anyone who may have questions. Everybody's thinking of lunch, aren't you? But perhaps while you're thinking about your questions, let me just get the ball rolling and to ask for something that I've been meaning to ask Professor Holmes, especially in regard to what he referred to as the gut issues, the kitchen table issues that Filipinos are mainly concerned about, and that's that is something that is very close to our hearts. But there are, of course, some spikes, right? In terms of like when do these gut issues become transformed to issues related to maritime security? I wanted to ask him that question, but I've just been informed that he will not be able to join us. So let me turn to Professor Cho and Mr. Ozaki. You spoke very clearly about the turn to the Indo-Pacific strategies of South Korea and Japan. And I was wondering if you can give us an idea of the factors that were that contributed, and perhaps even the domestic situation in South Korea and in Japan that prompted your respective countries to issue the Indo-Pacific strategies. So perhaps I can start with Professor Cho.
All right. Thank you very much for your question. Well, you know that the current president of South Korea, President Yoon, inaugurated last May of last year, right? That was kind of change of government from the progressive political party to conservative political party. So the announcement of the Indo-Pacific strategy by President Yoon is based on the domestic political change in South Korea. But I think what is more important in this new South Korea strategic repositioning is the sense of crisis, the sense of urgency, the sense of crisis in the existing international order. You know that South Korea is one of the largest, the biggest beneficiary of the post-Cold War international order. South Korea was a really poor and an abject country after the Korean War, but now Korea is number 10 in terms of the overall national GDP. So the multilateral system, free trade system, the liberal international order has been the background upon which South Korea was able to economically take off. But this order is in crisis right now. So South Korean, the current new Indo-Pacific strategy is based on this very dire sense of crisis that we need to join force with like-minded countries in bolstering, in maintaining the rules-based order. So I think that's most important factor behind the new Indo-Pacific strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Cho. And perhaps I can turn the virtual mic over to Mr. Ozaki. When you spoke about Japan's national security strategy, similar question, what were the factors that prompted Japan to issue this national security strategy in cognizance of what is happening in the geopolitical environment?
Well, thank you very much for your questions. Well, I should present the Prime Minister Kishida saying. Prime Minister Kishida always says that today's Ukraine may be tomorrow's East Asia, and he concluded at this year's Hiroshima summit that we are now faced with the challenge of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, which has shaken the international order. And it is precisely because of the current severe security environment that Japan, this year's G7 chair, has a mission to uphold a free and open international order based on the rule of law and to demonstrate to the world its determination to fully defend peace and prosperity. So I think Japanese government is willing, is pleased to help participate in capacity building of Philippines, and we have launched a new scheme of offshore security assistance. So I believe that the importance of Japan, US, Philippine trilateral cooperation is becoming bigger and bigger. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have a question from Professor De Castro here in front. Yes.
My question is addressed to Dr. Cho, and Mr. Osaki can also react. My question pertains to the fact that Japan has taken a very active role in regional security, especially here in maritime Southeast Asia. Japan recently decided to increase its defense budget by 2% of its gross domestic product, also acquiring weapons that could be aimed at precision strikes. How does Seoul view Japan's buildup of military capability and, of course, greater maritime security role in the Indo-Pacific region? And, of course, another question is, given the fact that both Northeast Asian countries had come out with their respective Indo-Pacific strategy, do we see the possibility of closer security cooperation between Seoul and Tokyo? Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Perhaps our speakers can answer. Professor Cho, would you like to start?
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I think one of the really exciting new development since the new government in Seoul is that we now try to recover the bilateral relationship with Japan. I mean, there are the Korean domestic constituency is a little bit divided over how we should manage relationship with Japan. But anyhow, President Yoon made a very important decision to improve the deteriorated bilateral relationship with Japan, which provides the basis, the basis of the security and strategic cooperation with Japan along with United States. So now we are beginning to rebuild the basis of trilateral security cooperation between Korea, Japan, and US. While I think the immediate and the primary security threat is from North Korea, so these trilateral security arrangements main objective is to deter the North Korean potential nuclear and missile threat. But I think going forward, the trilateral security cooperation between South Korea, Japan, and US could be and should be expanded to include other areas, including the maritime security areas. I mean, already I think Korea is in dialogue with US regarding the maritime issues in the Indo-Pacific, and I think there are a lot of opportunities and demands actually that we need to increase our range of engagement. In that regard, I think the Korean government is very much interested in expanding its role in regional security and strategic matters, including the maritime security. So in that regard, I think there are some new developments and positive movements on the part of Korean government. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And Mr. Ozaki, if you would like to add some insights to this.
Yes, I would like to echo what Dr. Cho has said, that trilateral cooperation among the Japan, US, and South Korea is quite important in order to maintain the peace and security, stability in the Indo-Pacific region. So unfortunately, the current relationship between Japan and Korea is ameliorating, and it is a good sign for both of us. So well, I have talked about trilateral cooperation among Japan, US, and Philippine cooperation, but of course, Japan, US, South Korea cooperation is quite important. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. One more question from the floor. Okay, well, I do have one question for Lowell, actually. Thanks for using the phrase that international law can be used as a sword and a shield. And I was wondering, Lowell, if you can, if you have some insights about how countries in the region can use ASEAN or can tap ASEAN to deepen maritime security to uphold the rules-based international order.
Thanks, Charmaine, for that question. Yes, I do. I do believe honestly in that line that international law can be used as a shield and also as a sword, as we have seen, and we've heard repeatedly as well. Secretary Albert de Rosario is famous in providing us that code that international law is a great equalizer. So we've seen, for example, in the arbitration, how it has been used as both as a shield and as a sword. It is a means to constrain, state behavior. But in response to your question, how can we use international law to mobilize or deepen, support or maritime security amongst the region and beyond? I think I just wish to draw attention to a paper I wrote for the Philippine Yearbook of International Law on diplomatic notes, because I heard the president of ADR Stratbase this morning mentioning that we are on the right side of history. So other than the tactical, the strategic, the theater aspects of our disputes with China, there's also that legitimacy side, which is very important. Public diplomacy and also the power of global opinion, as well as the legitimizing force of the opinion of states within the region and beyond. And so on this score, we should be more than confident that we really are in the good side of history, because we have all the major superpowers, maritime powers, the US, Australia, France, Germany, sorry, not Germany, and also regional states supporting the Philippine arbitration. And I've written on this, and we've seen the diplomatic notes that support the Philippine position. So other than the actual points of cooperation that we usually see in terms of naval or military or other points of cooperation, I think diplomacy plays a very important role in mobilizing support. And in this score, I think we truly have secured a massive victory for the moral victory that we've also won in the arbitration. So as we can see, that is really illustrative of how international law can be used as a shield and also as a weapon to advance our national interest.
All right.
Thanks, Charmaine. I hope it answers the question.
Thank you so much, Lowell. Any more questions? If there are none, I will turn the floor over to, or the mic over, back to Joyce. Thank you so much.
And thank you again to Dr. Charmaine, and to also tell our speakers, Dr. Lowell Bautista, Mr. Sotaro Ozaki, and Dr. Wongi Cho. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, at this point, we will now hear from the Department of Foreign Affairs. To read the statement of Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo, and to also introduce the special recorded message of Undersecretary Maria Teresa Lazaro, may we call on Honorable Maria Angela Ponce, Assistant Secretary for Maritime and Ocean Affairs at the Department of Foreign Affairs.
Good morning, Excellencies, colleagues in government. and our friends from the media and the think tank, and all of those joining us online, good morning. On behalf of the Department of Foreign Affairs, we would like to express our appreciation to StratBase, led by Dr. Dindo Manhit, for organizing this event and bringing us all here together, especially as it honors the legacy of one of our most beloved and respected Secretaries of Foreign Affairs, Secretary Albert Del Rosario. My task here is twofold, and that is first to introduce the statement of Undersecretary Lazaro, who is in Jakarta right now with Secretary Manalo for the 56th ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting, and therefore she is unable to join us, but has provided a video statement. But before that, I am honored to read the statement of the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Secretary Manalo, on the 7th anniversary of the award on the South China Sea arbitration. And let me quote. The Philippines today commemorates the 7th anniversary of the award on the South China Sea arbitration, an affirmation of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and its dispute settlement mechanisms. The award definitively settled the status of historic rights and maritime entitlements in the South China Sea and declared without legal effect claims that exceed entitlements beyond the geographic and substantive limits set by UNCLOS. It is now part of international law. Anniversaries are markers reminding us of the trajectory we have taken as a nation and as a people. In the decision to file a case for arbitration, the Philippines opted to take the path of principle, the rule of law, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. The tribunal's decision affirmed the correctness of that course of action. The award has since facilitated the plotting of new paths and trajectories, reflecting the rich maritime heritage of our country and our people, firm in the conviction that our rights over our maritime jurisdictions are indisputable. We welcome the growing number of partners that have expressed support for the award. We are honored that the award stands as a beacon whose guiding light serves all nations. It is a settled landmark and a definitive contribution to the progressive development of international law. It is ours as much as it is the world's. Just as lighthouses aid vessels in navigating the seas, the award will continue to illuminate the path for all who strive towards not just the peaceful resolution of disputes, but also the maintenance of a rules-based international order. We will continue to translate the positive outcomes of the award into positive gains for our people, to secure our legitimate interests in our maritime domain and to promote peace, security, and prosperity in the region. End of the statement. And on that note, I would like now to introduce the video statement, the pre-recorded video statement of Undersecretary Lazaro. Undersecretary Lazaro will be speaking on advancing an independent Philippine foreign policy in accordance with national interests. Thank you.
Mr. Victor Andres Dindo Manhit, President of StratBase ADR Institute, officials of StratBase ADR Institute, esteemed members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests and participants, colleagues in government, friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is a pleasure to speak before you today to mark the 70th-year anniversary of the South China Sea Arbitration Award. The Department of Foreign Affairs joins you in underscoring the importance of the Arbitral Award on this auspicious occasion. The award is a strong vindication of our legal claims in the West Philippine Sea. It is a stark symbolism of our legal victory against a much larger country. More importantly, it is a telling reminder to the world that the rules-based international order is a great equalizer that levels the playing field between powerful and vulnerable states. I wish to take this opportunity to thank the StratBase ADR Institute for this kind invitation to speak in this conference, particularly about advancing the Philippine independent foreign policy in accordance with national interests. The Department of Foreign Affairs appreciates the initiative of StratBase ADR Institute in providing a platform for discussion of a subject that should not be made esoteric, but rather should be laymanized for wider understanding and interest with the general public. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to provide some context in today's discussion by referencing to the Philippine Constitution of 1987, which is our supreme law. It is important to note that the country's pursuit for an independent foreign policy is of constitutional provenance and is couched in the Constitution as a state obligation. The Constitution in Section 7 of Article 2 mandates that the state shall pursue an independent foreign policy. The operative phrase there is shall pursue, that directs the state into a particular action. As such, the President, as the chief architect of the Philippine foreign policy, carries out this constitutional mandate through her own foreign policy agenda and priorities. The Philippines pursues an independent foreign policy in its relations with other states with paramount considerations placed on national sovereignty, territorial integrity, national interest, and the right to self-determination, all of which are provided for in the Constitution. Guided by the said provision in the Philippine Constitution, each Philippine president responds to global issues and concerns confronting the country according to the prevailing realities presented by an ever-evolving global agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, in one of his many articulations, President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. said that national interests are to be pursued in the context of the global order. This is so because the global order is characterized by deeper political, economic, and socio-cultural connectedness, so enmeshed that no state can afford hermitage, and no state can have the monopoly of power to dictate and impose the global agenda. The current world milieu where we find ourselves in is made up of a myriad of actors, including multilateral institutions, whose roles in world affairs and whose voices on global issues feed into the state of play of the multipolar global order. Whatever the global situation may be, we promote our national interest in the world stage through the three pillars of the Philippine foreign policy, which have remained constant over the years. These are 1. Preservation and enhancement of national security. 2. Promotion and attainment of economic security. And 3. Protection of the rights and promotion of the welfare and interests of Filipinos overseas. Our national interests are determined in consideration of the prevailing external environment and domestic necessities based on what is best for the country and the Filipino people in the medium and or long term. Again, ladies and gentlemen, our national interests have been front and center of our foreign policy at every turn of our international engagements, be it in the bilateral, regional, and multilateral milieu. We value our bilateral allies and partners which have provided us beneficial support in the political, economic, and socio-cultural domains. We actively engage with ASEAN as it is a core expression of Philippine diplomacy. ASEAN has forged itself as a hub for dialogue and cooperation in broader Asia. Many of its actors are part of and have shifted their proverbial political and economic rudder towards the Indo-Pacific. In the multilateral front, we strongly advocate for multilateralism as a means to ensure a rules-based international order. The Philippines believes that there is no better alternative to a rules-based international order under the Charter of the United Nations. We further believe that multilateralism provides a global platform that promotes collective responsibility and obligation among states towards the attainment of common good. Our belief in the rules-based international order was a motivation for the Philippines in taking the legal route on the issue of the West Philippine Sea. Ladies and gentlemen, the issue of the West Philippine Sea is not only a matter of national interest, but foremost of national sovereignty and territorial integrity, the latter two being superior in national significance than the former. In Section 7 of Article 2 of the Philippine Constitution, which I earlier cited, these paramount considerations were listed in such sequential order where national sovereignty and territorial integrity take precedence over national interest and the right to self-determination. A language formulation that was a result of impassioned debate by the members of the 1986 Constitutional Commission when the section on foreign policy was discussed. Hence, taking China to the Permanent Court of Arbitration on the West Philippine Sea is as much a matter of defending our national sovereignty and territorial integrity as it is about promoting our national interest. And the legal route that we took did not disappoint us with the resulting favorable 2016 Arbitral Award, which authoritatively ruled that China's 9-line had no basis in law and is without legal effect. As an affirmation of the dispute resolution mechanisms of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, otherwise known as UNCLOS, the 2016 award not only sets reason and right in the South China Sea, but it is an inspiration for how matters should be considered through reason and right by states facing similarly challenging circumstances. Moreover, the award not only upheld the Philippines' sovereign rights and jurisdiction in the exclusive economic zone, or EEZ, but also affirmed that certain actions by China within the Philippine EEZ violated our sovereign rights and were thus unlawful and a violation of international conventions. Having been made final, the award is no longer contestable and is beyond compromise. It is now part of international law. We firmly reject attempts to deliberately diminish or undermine the award's definitive legal effects in international law. With strong legal standing and complementary nexus, the UNCLOS and the South China Sea Arbitration Award of 12 July 2016 are the twin anchors of the Philippines' policy and actions on the West Philippine Sea. Moving forward, we will continue to uphold our sovereignty, sovereign rights and jurisdiction in the West Philippine Sea. With urgency, we will also continue to press for a code of conduct in the South China Sea through ASEAN based on UNCLOS and one that considers the interests of all stakeholders beyond ASEAN and China in order to ensure that the South China Sea remains a sea of peace, a sea of security and stability, and of prosperity. It is impossible to imagine a code of conduct for the South China Sea being negotiated outside the framework of ASEAN. This is a process that perseveres, despite the pressures of destabilizing actions and incidents of harassment and intimidation. Incidents such as these have a decidedly human element to them. Harassment of fisherfolk in their traditional fishing grounds, for example, have a political salience that is often understated in discussions, focusing on security aspects of the disputes. They render the human face to the disputes and trigger public sensibilities that cannot be ignored. All parties seeking the successful conclusion of a code of conduct must contribute to creating conditions of confidence and trust in an atmosphere of peace and stability to ensure success. Ladies and gentlemen, as defined by the President, our foreign policy is one that pursues international engagements on the basis of our national interest and in recognizes of the interests we share with fellow nations in pursuit of peace, security, and prosperity. Our aim is to solidify partnerships and reassure ties with existing allies and to develop new and meaningful engagements with non-traditional partners in the political and economic spheres. Our independent foreign policy allows us to choose for ourselves with whom we interact and befriend without fear of backlash and censure from outside forces. The President was clear about his outward-looking and inclusive diplomatic approach early on his presidency that he himself has consistently resonated on many occasions before local and international audiences, including during his outbound visits, which is the highest possible platform in conveying our foreign policy agenda to the world. Our foreign policy necessitates that we look internally at our enormous goodwill, our comparative advantage, our resources, and our strengths and niche, all of which we leverage to the world to gain optimum political advantage and economic benefits. Ladies and gentlemen, the Philippine commitment to an independent foreign policy goes beyond the South China Sea. It encompasses all aspects of the Philippine relationships with countries, from trade to security to cultural exchange. The independent foreign policy is rooted in the belief that the Philippines can best advance its interests by maintaining its independence and its sovereignty. A recent important example is our foreign policy that recognizes the consequential role of the larger Indo-Pacific region as the fastest growing economic region and projected largest contributor to global growth in the next 30 years. The Indo-Pacific has drawn attention from many states and economies with varying and intersecting interests. It has become a whirlpool for cooperation and competition at the same time. The Philippines as a maritime and archipelagic state will always support initiatives for a stable Indo-Pacific where the use of the maritime waterways in the region is free, open, and unconstrained by coercion, mindful of the region's volatility for being a home to the world's complex security flashpoints, especially in the maritime domain. Our circumstances as a maritime and archipelagic state have entailed us to reorient ourselves towards maritime relations, which includes the establishment of maritime dialogues to serve as a platform of discussion on various maritime-related issues, where the Philippines and a bilateral partner explore ideas on strengthening and expanding the scope of maritime cooperation. With the promising prospect for the economy, Philippine participation in trade mechanisms such as the Regional Cooperation for Economic Partnership or RCEP and the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework or otherwise called IPEF or IPEF are other examples where the country hopes to optimize economic gains. These economic engagements are an expression of our genuine desire to foster cooperation even with parties that may be sitting on the opposing side of a political spectrum due to a great power competition. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, we believe that the Philippine independent foreign policy is a positive and necessary step forward for the country and the world. It represents the Philippines' commitment to standing up for its sovereignty and its rights, as well as pursuing its own interests in the global stage. We are hopeful that our independent foreign policy will continue to yield positive results for the Philippines and for the rest of the world in the years to come. Thank you for your attention. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much again to the Department of Foreign Affairs. Thank you to Secretary Enrique Manalo, Undersecretary Maria Teresa Lazaro, and Assistant Secretary Maria Angela Ponce. Again, let's give a warm round of applause to all our speakers this morning. It has been a very, very insightful day. And we still have a lot in store for you guys this afternoon. But for now, I'm sure many of us are already looking forward to the next part of our day, which is the lunch break. So we prepared the buffet for you outside. So we hope you enjoy the food, and we'll see you all again by 1:30 in the afternoon. Thank you. Hello. To our speakers, please, those who are occupying tables 2 and 3, we have a plated lunch for our guests. So no need to fall in line. 1, 2, 3. 2 and 3. Okay. Again, to our guests in tables 2 and 3, no need to fall in line. We have prepared plated lunch for you. Thank you.